thought we were doing Mike Vanderbilt next, and then all of a sudden I came up.
I thought it was Mike Vanderbilt, but I don't run this thing.
All right. You're just following orders.
I'm just a pretty face.
You take orders? Good. I'll have a ham and cheese on rye. Thank you.
I take orders from her.
Oh, yeah. I don't blame you for that. I'm really glad to be here. I'm proud to be here. I love Texas. I don't know how many of you know, but I used to be a Texan. I lived in Fredericksburg, Texas, and even Fredericksburg is part of Texas, even though it's a German town. And we love Texas. But I'll tell you what, I'm disappointed in Texas. You have 254 sheriffs, and there's about 10 that believe in our oath of office and the Constitution and standing for liberty. Texas? I thought this was, remember, the Alamo state. I thought this was the state sovereignty state. I thought this was the independent state. I mean, there's been more talk about secession than there has been just following the Constitution. We don't need to secede. Follow the Constitution. If we follow the Constitution, we're not leaving. The federal government's going back where it belongs. If you follow the Constitution. Now, let me give one example about that, okay? The Constitution details what powers the federal government has, right? It's Article 1, Section 8. It details what they can do. If you look through the entire Constitution, including Article 1, Section 8, the federal government has about 30 assignments. 30! That's it! If they want more, what do they have to go through? The 10th Amendment. And that's the states. And so you got to ask yourself a question. Who's in charge of enforcing and securing the 10th Amendment? In other words, who's in charge of enforcing state sovereignty? Barack Obama? He's the one destroying it. Congress? Same thing. They're the ones destroying it. State sovereignty will only be enforced by the entity, by the governmental entity that's in charge of that. Yep. Read the 10th Amendment. And so the states are in charge of state sovereignty. I know that sounds strange, doesn't it? Yeah, the states are in charge of state sovereignty. And so if the federal government goes too far, whose job is it to tell them, get back where you belong? It's the states. So inside the state, who's in charge of doing that? Sheriffs, county commissioners, county attorneys, state reps, state senators, governors, dog catchers, judges, anybody that belongs in this state that works for the state. We the people, plus our elected officials, working together to do what? Secure the principles of liberty that our country was founded upon. Secure the principles of liberty that the Alamo was founded upon. And then you secure liberty. Now, when I was sheriff in Arizona, I'm not sheriff anymore. People still call me Sheriff Mack, and that's great, that's fine. But I haven't been sheriff for 17 years. I was the youngest sheriff in the state of Arizona. At the time, we had a Sheriff's Association meeting in Phoenix. And there's only 15 counties in Arizona. We're the 6th largest state and only 15 counties. So the counties are pretty big there. And we're having a meeting in Phoenix, and there's 3 strangers there, and there's only 12 sheriffs. 12 out of the 15 are at the meeting. And 3 guys show up in 3-piece suits, and I've never seen these guys before, and they were from the BATF. Now, if you're a gun owner, you ought to know who the BATF is, but just in case you don't, that's the federal bureaucracy in charge of regulating the Second Amendment. They're the ones in charge of shall not be infringed. Well, it's just the opposite. They're the ones that shall infringe. And they've been established to infringe on the Second Amendment. Just the opposite of what the law says. So the BATF is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And these guys show up and they say, sheriffs, we have a new law that Congress has passed, and you, as sheriffs of this country, are required to conduct the criminal history background checks, keep all the records, and basically monitor people who are getting guns in your county. And you have to pay for it all yourselves. And if you don't do it, you're subject to federal arrest. Folks, I'm telling you the truth here. You can look it up. You can look it up. Look up the Brady Bill. This is all within the Brady Bill. And the Brady Bill was the first time in American history where the federal government passed a law commandeering the office of sheriff for federal bidding and threatening to arrest us if we failed to comply. Would you have complied with that, Pam? Sheriff Elliott? And that's a no-brainer. We're not going to do that. And so I actually made a mistake, but I did something really crazy. But it was a mistake. I actually was the first sheriff in American history to sue the federal government, take a case all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and kick their butts. Okay? Now you have to remember, I filed the lawsuit in 1994. We won in 1997. Who was the president?
Clinton.
It was Clinton.
Yeah.
I sued the Clinton administration and lived to tell about it. Hey, that's a miracle in and of itself. But to actually go to the United States Supreme Court and win? Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm here to praise one of your Texas sheriffs. His name was J.R. Cook, and he was from Val Verde County, Del Rio, Texas. God rest his soul. Out of the 7 sheriffs that did this lawsuit with me, out of the 7 of us that did this, he's the only one that's passed on. And not only that, he was the only one from Texas that did it. 1 out of 254. That kind of sounds like a little bit of a problem, doesn't it? 1 sheriff did this. But when you look at it, only 7 out of 3,100. 7 out of 3,100 did this. 1 from Arizona, me, 1 from Texas, 1 from Louisiana, 1 from Mississippi, 1 from Vermont, 1 from Montana, and 1 from Wyoming. 7. No 2 from any state. And it was a real roller coaster ride. But we should have done just what Sheriff Elliott said. We should have just told him no. And if I'd have seen any support for that at the time, that's what I would have done. But I was young, I was a rookie sheriff, had been in law enforcement at that time about 15, 16 years, and so I decided that I would do the lawful thing and sue them. I never thought it would go to the Supreme Court. I thought they'd squash me like a pumpkin seed. I told my wife, they're going to get rid of me. I don't think they're going to kill me, but they're going to stop this. You don't have to worry about this going very far. But then when other sheriffs started jumping on board the lawsuit, it totally protected me, and it totally protected the lawsuit. And in fact, it saved the lawsuit at one point, because when we won, Sheriff Prince from Montana and I, we won at the district court, both of us. But then you go on appeal to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, the most liberal, crazy court in our country. In fact, they're the most overturned court in our country, the Ninth Circuit. So are we going to win there? Oh, heck no. And we didn't. We lost. But Sheriff Coog from Texas and Sheriff Romero from Louisiana are in the Fifth Circuit, which is New Orleans. And they won. The same case. The exact same case. And they won, and we lost. And so that right there pretty much guaranteed us a trip to the United States Supreme Court. And indeed, on December 4th, 1996, Sheriff Prince and I appeared before the U.S. Supreme Court on this case. And then on June 27, 1997, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 split, and this should offend you too, the 5 Republicans sided with me, and the 4 Democrats sided with Clinton. And we won 5-4. It's just a political game with these guys. They're appointed by politicians, and they follow their leader. And that's how the Supreme Court is pretty much run today. except for one time when Justice Roberts made a huge mistake about a year ago. But that's another story for another time. But believe me, the United States Supreme Court cannot make a law a tax if it was not passed as a tax. That's illegal. It's impossible. They cannot do it. The only thing Justice Roberts could have done lawfully is refer it back to Congress. You can make this, it'll be constitutional if you make it a tax. If it's not a tax, it's not constitutional. But, okay. So we win our case, and the Brady Bill is declared unconstitutional. But how many of you knew that there were actually 5 Brady Bills? Each one going to be passed after the other. Very good. Each one passed after the other until all gun shows, a thing of the past. FFLs, the goal was to get rid of 70% of all gun shops. And by the time the 5th one would have come around, it was going to serialize and regulate ammunition. That was all part of the Brady Bill movement. You've heard about it recently since Obama's been in office. This has been talked about and planned since the Brady Bill. The Brady Bill was going to serialize all ammunition. Right now, they're buying up all the ammunition, making it very difficult for all of us to get it. That's been part of a plan also. But let's get back to the freedom issues here. Sheriff Elliott talked about the Constitution. And specifically now, let's look at the supremos of the supreme. The Founding Fathers got back together after they developed and promulgated the Constitution. They got back together about 2 years later. For what? Because Patrick Henry and a few others, some of the right-wing radical Founding Fathers, boy, you don't want to be that, huh? They said the Constitution doesn't go far enough. We failed to list a Declaration of Rights, the ones that are untouchable by government. We have to have a list that is there for everyone proudly to see. These are the rights you cannot touch. It's a list of the untouchables. And so when they all got together, they said, okay, let's come up with the list of untouchables. Let's imagine that we're doing the same thing today. We list all the rights that government cannot change, cannot legislate against, cannot alter, cannot encroach upon, cannot infringe. How many would we come up with? Well, the Founding Fathers did the same thing we would probably do today. They came up with 189. How would you like to list that to Barack Obama and his administration? This is what you can never do again. Wow. I came up with 189. And then they found, they kind of worked them down, and they came down, they dwindled them down to 12. So if they came up with 12, why don't we have 12? Because the states ratified 10. 10. The states did it. The same group and the same governmental entity that formed the federal government in the first place. Oh, okay. Yeah. The states formed the federal government, and so the federal government was a creature of the states. In other words, our employee. And then we gave them 30 assignments. And now, of those 30 assignments, how many of those 30 are related to law enforcement? They have 5 law enforcement powers granted through the Constitution from us. Let's list them real quickly, shall we? How many of you know them? Counterfeiting. Treason. Treason. Felonies committed on the high seas, or piracies. That's where the FBI has authority. Crimes against treaties or nations. So in other words, if you went down to Mexico illegally and did something down there illegally, the FBI could investigate that. Okay? 5, and this is a law enforcement authority. They are required in Article 4, Section 4 to protect our borders from invasion. Boy, howdy, they do a great job on those. If the federal government, if the FBI would investigate treason, those poor boys would never get out of Washington, D.C., would they? I mean, we'd be saying, we got to hire more FBI agents, man. Those guys are way too overworked. But we let that go, too. So the Founding Fathers came up with this plan that these God-given rights, as detailed within the Bill of Rights, could never be touched by government. And the one that they use the most powerful language with, this particular right, in only 27 words, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed